Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the week's events as reported by Tony in the world of Scientology. Hey, Tony, welcome back.
Hey, Chris.
All right, let's do a show. We had some interesting stuff this week. As we predicted last week, there were some legal updates and other things that we didn't predict. First off, you posted a really interesting story with the updated staff contract, the actual legally binding document, not that ridiculous billion-year thing. What was up with this post?
You know, a reader that likes to communicate with me once in a while sent me that, and I kind of sat on it for a little while at first because there's no date on it, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at when I talked to this person. And they thought it was pretty recent, but they couldn't swear to it. But so I started looking around. We have seen these before. I posted a staff contract a decade ago. And just last fall, Apostate Alex, he posted a few different of these sort of contracts.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I looked at this one, the more I became convinced that this is newer. Mm-hmm. I think this may be what staff are signing at the Ideal Orgs right now.
Okay.
But I haven't confirmed that. It looks new. But the point was, so it's been a few years. What the heck? Let's all take a look at it. So I put it up, and wow, what a reaction. People were really, I mean, the Radar magazine jumped on it, and they did their own story on it.
That's right.
And people were talking about it. And I think that what people are reacting to is it's just so nakedly extortionate, the way it's making you, all the religious language. It's so heavy. You're joining a religion. You're committing to a religion. This is a spiritual pursuit. You're recognizing that you're part of a church, you know,
yep.
and then, you know, and then once you agreed to that, then you sign away all these rights, right? You're not expecting to be paid anything. You can't sue us. You know, we may send you to wherever. There's nothing, you know, you just have to go along. So I think people were a little shocked to see it so spelled out in black and white that if you want a job at the Church of Scientology, you basically have to give up all your rights. And people do. They sign it, Chris.
Yep.
What's that like? I mean, why? I guess once you've decided that you're going to sign up, whether it's staff or Sea Org, you're just like, okay, this is the thing to do, and you don't really read it carefully. Is that what happens?
Oh, absolutely. It's rose-colored glasses 100%. And this is typical, the typical cult experience is you sign away because you are absolutely sure all these people who have just love bombed the hell out of you, and that's routinely what's happening before people sign these contracts, is they sign them in one of two states. They sign them in euphoric, all right, oh, I'm going to do this thing. It's going to be so wonderful. I'm going to save mankind. Or after they've been harangued, mentally exhausted after a 7 or 8 hour recruitment session, which I've done all night at Denny's, by the way, with people, like, just, you know, and they're not reading it at all. They're just not. And there's trust and loyalty and no, it's all good. I trust you guys. I've even watched them say that. I don't need to read this. I trust you guys.
Right.
You know, and then they end up where they end up, right? Which is really a bad place. Another point on this also is that this is the same contract that the Sea Org members actually sign. There's that billion-year ridiculous piece of paper thing, but this is the actual legally binding document. And Sea Org members are made to sign this thing every 5 years because it's got a little checkbox on this is going to be good for 2.5 or for 5 years.
Okay.
Right. So if you go sign up for staff and you're going to go do full-time training like at Flag or down in LA or something like that, it's 5 years. And by the way, the contract starts when you come back from your training. That's the date when the 5 years begins. So you go off for training for 2 years, which is not unheard of at all. You've actually just committed to 7.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting stuff. And somebody commented to me, and I wanted to ask you about this because I actually just talked about this on my Q&A. somebody brought up the legal language and the, hold harmless, release, indemnify stuff. And I said, well, that's pretty boilerplate stuff for contracts. Your parents, your siblings, your entire genetic code is never going to sue Scientology. But to me, the bigger forest for the trees with this thing is, why are you being made to sign a contract at all if you're a religious volunteer?
Yeah.
Does that strike? I mean, is that a good question? It seems to me it is.
Well, I saw an earlier version. Claire Headley actually shared an earlier version with me, and it was much more kind of an interrogation to try to, figure out if you're a double agent trying to get inside the church.
That's true.
The one that they have now it's so clear. This is being written for a judge. This is being written for a judge to convince them that this is a legitimate religious organization and that this person knew what they were doing when they signed this document.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and you can see that it's been honed over the years of litigation.
Yeah. No, it's very true. In fact, Claire made a really good point to me recently, which was, when they brought their suit against Scientology, religious arbitration was not part of that picture.
That's and the thing. Well, see, here's let me shock you, because Claire and I talked about this. She showed me a contract she signed in 1991, and Chris, it has the arbitration clause in it.
Right. So but they didn't use it,
and I didn't know they went back that far. So I think the arbitration language has been in there for many, many, many years. But it's only since about 2011 or 2012 that the lawyers started focusing on it in court. Because Mark and Claire sued in 2009 and the arbitration thing didn't come up. Laura DiCrescenzo sued in 2009. As far as I know, they never tried that angle on her either. The first time I heard about this arbitration clause was in relation to a lawsuit filed by Bert Shippers and Lynn Hoverson. And it was like 2011, 2012, something like that. Now, they weren't forced into arbitration, I don't think, but that became an issue in that case. And I remember that's when I first learned about the Hooters ruling. Do you know about the Hooters ruling, Chris? Have we ever talked about that?
I don't think we have. What's this?
Okay, well, the original Hooters restaurant is in Clearwater, Florida.
Oh,
I don't know if you knew that or not.
That's right. I knew that, yes.
And at some point, a woman that worked there ended up suing them. And I don't remember what the facts in the case were, whether she was fired or I don't know what her allegations were. But the point is, when she went to sue them, they came into court and said, no, you signed an arbitration clause, and forced her into arbitration. But the reason why that went to appeals court is that Hooters not only said she was obliged to go to arbitration, but that Hooters got to choose the arbitrator. And an appeals court said, no, either or. You can require arbitration, but you can't also choose the arbitrator. That's got to be independent. You can't have both.
Right.
And I remember in the Bert Shippers Lynn Hoverson lawsuit, talking to an attorney about that and saying, hey, what Scientology's doing is in violation of that Hooters ruling. But the problem is, whenever it gets down to it, it's always like, yeah, but we're a church. We can do whatever the hell we want,
Right.
But as far as I know, the first actual forced court-ordered arbitration was the 2013 lawsuit filed by the Garcias, and that happened in 2017. So I'm still looking into it, but Chris, it looks like to me they've had that arbitration language in there forever, but it wasn't until 2012, 2013 that their lawyers started saying, hey, we need to start using this in court.
Exactly.
And they've been on kind of a roll now. Obviously, they've forced the Garcia case into arbitration, Valerie Haney, Valeska Paris's case. Jane Doe 1 is still facing that possibility in her lawsuit. The only people who have overcome that is the Bixler lawsuit, the Jane Doe's and the Danny Masterson victims, because that appeals court ruled that the allegations of a harassment had occurred after they left Scientology, so that those contracts don't, apply forever. So that was a good ruling for them. But anyway, so I was surprised to see it in a contract that Claire had signed in 1991, going way back, and now, like I said, we found this new one that also has that language. But like I said, I got a much bigger reaction to that contract than I thought I was going to.
Yeah, no, I think people are really surprised when they get into the details of this stuff. And I hope it gets across, by the way, to people. And just to say this, right? Read what you're signing. It matters. I know, but got to put it out there. And also this does speak, I think, to the fact that, you can put all the boilerplate language in there, which they clearly were doing, and years ago, but it's what you're paying for. You're paying for the cleverness of the lawyers to make the arguments. And so some bright spark in 2010 or 11 clearly went through the contract and go, well, wait a minute, what about this? And nobody ever really twigged on that before, and now we see, as I think a really good point you made, now the language is updated so that it's so formally a religious commitment. Let's really beat this over the head so the judges understand, right, what we're doing here. And we have every right we want to abuse these people. We're a religion.
That's right. That's what they argue in court. I've seen it in court papers. They've literally said it that way. It's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. Okay, moving on. We have, I'm going to say, unfortunate news. I am a little put out by this. The Masterson lawsuit on hold. What's happened here this week?
Well, the Bixler lawsuit is the one you're talking about. That's the lawsuit filed by Danny Masterson's victims. They filed this lawsuit in 2019, even before Danny was charged criminally. It's originally a harassment lawsuit. It's not about the sexual attacks themselves, but the women came forward to the LAPD and they allege in the lawsuit that since then they've been subject to a concerted campaign over years of stalking, harassment, surveillance, hacking, even some of their pets being killed, and that this was they blame Danny Masterson and the Church of Scientology. Well, after they filed that lawsuit, Danny was then charged criminally and went into, the preliminary hearing and then 2 trials. And throughout that period, that lawsuit was put on hold. Once Danny was convicted a year ago, went to prison, now that lawsuit got going again. So 2 things happened in that lawsuit. First of all, Scientology knew that the women, now that it was going again, and now that Danny was in prison and conditions were better for them in this lawsuit, that Scientology knew that the women were coming up with a new version of the lawsuit. Right now, they're in a different position. Danny's sitting in a prison cell. This lawsuit should have a better chance, and so they're going to bolster it. They're going to add some stuff. But even though Scientology knew that was coming, they filed some motions to strike, asking the judge basically to gut the lawsuit based on the previous version. I remember at the time thinking, well, a new version's coming. Why are you trying to do that? Anyway, so the judge they got after the initial going to appeals court and coming back was a guy named Judge Upinder Kalra. And he denied those motions from Scientology, just knocked them flat. And it was such a favorable ruling for the Jane Does and against Scientology that Leah Remini has asked to have that judge too, right? I mean, this guy gets it. This is great. Meanwhile, the Jane Does did submit on December 27th this new version of the lawsuit they want to introduce. It adds another victim, actress Trisha Vesey, who testified in the first trial. It adds sexual battery charges against Masterson. So now the actual attacks are becoming part of the lawsuit. And the thing that you and I have been most interested in, they want to add racketeering allegations. And they say in the paperwork, they want to prove Scientology is a criminal enterprise. So for all these reasons, that December 27th second amended complaint is very, very interesting and will make this lawsuit so much bigger. Mm-hmm. But they have to get permission from Judge Kalra to accept the new complaint. Mm-hmm. And that was initially scheduled for March. Then it got pushed back to May. And finally, it was set up on May 29th. Well, right a week before, Scientology's always got to throw a wrench in everything. A week before the judge could make a decision on that, Scientology files a notice that they're going to appeal his ruling denying their motions to strike. And so this week in court, and we were fortunate enough, Megan Cuniff went down there for us. She's a terrific reporter. She went down and said, yeah, the judge is saying that, look, I can't move forward on your new complaint as long as Scientology is appealing my previous order. So as long as that appeal's going on, basically the case is on hold. And Judge Calra estimated that's going to be a year to a year and a half wait. So
Wow.
again, we want to see if these women are going to get to bolster this lawsuit and add racketeering, and now they have to wait another year to year and a half. It's just so frustrating, but that's what Scientology does. I mean, who knows if this appeal has any chance, but they're going to spend the money on that. They're going to spend lots of money on appeal briefs with special appellate attorneys. I mean, that's the thing about Scientology. Money's no object. So it just gets put on hold, and that's just a shame.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. This is that sort of thing we mentioned, or sort of, what's the word? I was going to say laughed, but that expresses the wrong emotion. About Wallersheim's case last week when we talked about that, right? It's like a 20-year thing. I don't mean to imply by that this is going to be a 20-year thing, but this is how Scientology plays.
Hey, it's already been 5 years since they filed it, and now
right.
Another year and a half with just waiting for the appeals court to look at Judge Calra's ruling. So,
right. So
very frustrated.
It's just kind of, I want to point these things out from time to time, because people ask often, well, why don't you all, why haven't you? We have. This is what happens. Yeah. It's a long, dragged out process. This isn't Law and Order. It doesn't get done in one night, right? It doesn't get done in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Valerie Haney update. Speaking of, I thought this was a pretty bold move this week. What happened?
We were fortunate that in April, Valerie gave us an update. Readers at the Underground Bunker got to read an interview with her. She, her case, she also sued in 2019. She's suing for various ways that Scientology harassed her and libeled her. And she got forced into arbitration. The judge ruled that she had signed a contract saying she wouldn't sue, so she can't sue, and she's got to go through arbitration. So why is she going through it? Because she can't appeal his ruling until she's been through the arbitration. Right. So the Garcias had the first case forced into arbitration. That arbitration lasted 1 day in Los Angeles in 2017. And Valerie's arbitration started last October, I think it was, and went 3 days. And I was there. I was across the street at a hotel talking to her and her attorneys after each day. And I remember thinking to myself, why is this going on? Why is this taking so long? And after 3 days, they hadn't even begun talking about her lawsuit claims.
Yep.
It was obvious that they were just stringing her along, bringing out boxes of stuff about her past, bringing in witnesses to yell at her. And she couldn't, and she was alone, right? There's this room with all these Scientologists there, and they won't let her have an attorney. They won't let her have a friend. She can't use her phone. She can't record anything. Mm-hmm. Incredible. So while I knew that they had scheduled 2 more days in February, I just hadn't heard anything from her. In April, she contacted me and said, you know what? They brainwashed me again, and I don't know what I'm doing. Of course, I want to talk to you. And so in April, we did a story about what those 2 days in February were like. And it was more of the same, more witnesses, more, it turns out, Chris, she was in the Sea Org at Int Base, and Sea Org people at Int Base don't generally have internet access, but there's like a communal computer that she could sit down and do some things. They brought out a box that had records of every single search she had ever done on that computer. They also brought out records of every one of the 13,000 emails she had ever made or received in her 20 years in Scientology. And she said to me, Tony, they're proving my point. You're a slave in Scientology, right? They've got every record on you. So just a bizarre star chamber that she's going through. Well, initially, Judge Gail Killefer had set a date of June 5th this week, assuming by now it would be done, right? Again, it's incredible. It's been 5 days already, and they're not done. And so we expected that this week Scientology will go into court and say, it's Judge, we still have more days to go. And the judge, what judge has got no choice? Like, okay, I'll set another hearing down the road. But what Valerie's attorneys did this week is they wanted the judge to at least know all this garbage that Valerie's been going through. And so her
Right.
attorney, Graham Barry, submitted a 31-page report this week explaining what she went through during those 2 days and about them bringing in documents, not giving her a chance to review them ahead of time, bringing in witnesses she had no time to prepare for, yelling at her, I mean, ganging up on her, all this garbage. And what Granberry asked the judges, because now they're talking about 5 more days in August in a row, 5 more days of this garbage, right? And Granberry is saying to the judge, you should at least set an end date. You know, they shouldn't be able to do this forever. But I got to tell you, Chris, at that hearing this week, I expect the judge to say, I can't. It's
Yeah.
all up to Scientology. And, you know, you can see what's going on. They are never going to finish this arbitration. They are just going to keep harassing her and harassing her until she gives up. And my theory for why is this. When the Garcias went through their arbitration and appealed, it was in Tampa. And it was in federal court. And Scientology knew that the Garcias would have to appeal to the 11th Circuit in Atlanta, which is known for being a conservative circuit appeals court. And sure enough, the lead justice in that decision that confirmed the arbitration talked about this church. And, you know, it's like, oh, there we go. See?
Yep. There it is.
But that's not the situation in LA. If Valerie can get through this thing, and the judge accepts it, then she can appeal to California State Appellate Court,
Right.
and a particular state appellate division that has already proved that it understands Scientology's bullshit.
Right.
So I think Scientology is worried that if Valerie can get to an appeal, she may do better than the Garcias did in Florida. And so they're just going to string it out forever and never get to a decision. That's what I think they're doing.
I could not agree with you more. And the added benefit of that for Scientology from their perspective is the realization, wait a minute, we control this situation completely. There's nothing anybody else can do about this. We're a religion.
It's insane.
I'm telling you, folks out there, you gotta understand the abuse potential in this term when it comes to the legal world. You can get away with so much under the banner of a religion. There's a lot of reasons that cult leaders or these predatory people go in a non-religious direction, like the Keith Ranieris of the world. But there's some serious benefits to playing the religious card, especially in the United States. And we're seeing it play out right in front of us. And please know that as frustrated and teeth gnashingly frustrated as we are about this, there are other groups and cult members out there that are watching this playbook and they are taking notes.
Yep.
And this has got to stop. And it's only going to stop by educating judges and changing the system. And it just has to change. So I hope legals out there are paying attention, because we're kind of leaning in your direction right now to step up and do something about this, because all we can do is report on it. I mean, you know?
Yep.
All right. Anyway, this is my call to action, please. Okay, now this was just what it kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't even know this was coming. Justin Craig, L. Ron Hubbard 2.0. Dude, what is up with this guy?
You know, it's a story I still enjoy keeping tabs on because, look, I appreciate the free zone. I appreciate independent Scientologists because they talk openly about things that people in the Church of Scientology have to hide.
Yep.
And so they talk openly about things like body thetans and OT levels and all that, and it's great.
Yep.
And yeah, I think they have some pretty nutty ideas, and it's striking to me that they got away from this organization, but they still are very happy with L. Ron Hubbard's ideas.
Yep.
And you know, maybe they're a little gullible. I don't know. All I know is this guy came along in about 2017, 2018 and claimed that he was the reincarnated L. Ron Hubbard, and he legally changed his name to Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. And he got a following up in the Seattle area,
Yes, he did.
people that were convinced. And I heard about it and looked him up, and it turns out that under his original name, Justin Craig, he had quite a criminal background. And I actually got him in a conversation, a text message conversation with him, and it was really interesting because I caught him. He didn't know what L. Ron Hubbard called Mary Sue privately.
Mm.
He said Mary, but actually Ron called her Susie.
Mhm.
And if he was the reincarnated L. Ron Hubbard, he should have known that.
Yeah.
And when I brought that up, he's like, "Oh, well, I don't have a total recall of my previous life." It was just like, what a con man, right? So I just thought it was funny. I wrote a story about it, and then that was 2018. So 3 years later, in 2021, he ends up in jail in Tennessee, and he's been there ever since. And he's facing some pretty serious charges. His trial keeps getting put off. Um, he's in a kind of a rural part of Tennessee, and I've had a hard time, getting information out of that law enforcement complex over there.
Hmm.
Finally, I got the right person, and they sent me some really great records of what this guy's actually accused of. So he had another court date, and also, Chris, he's still communicating with his fans on Facebook, and some of them are still sending him money.
From within prison.
Yeah,
Jail.
yeah. He's in jail. He's not in prison yet.
Not in prison, right?
He's
Jail.
in jail awaiting trial.
Jesus.
And he's still got people. He finally decided that Scientology's dead, and he's created this new thing called Asperianism. And
That's right.
there are ex-Scientologists that swear by it and say that this guy's got to be wrong because he's come up with these new ideas that are great, and they send him money. I actually had a little screenshot about one woman who sent $144 last month because she wants to give him 10% of what she makes. They don't audit in Asperianism, they phase. So she had been phasing people and had made enough that she sent Ron Lafayette $144 last month. So yeah, I mean, it's wild. And I wanted people to see exactly what he's really accused of. It's some brutal stuff. He's a violent guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's serious stuff. And he's on a $500,000 bond. He keeps talking, he keeps telling his followers that he expects to get out soon. I'm not sure how he expects that to happen, but because some of the charges involve punching and choking jail guards. And law enforcement and judges take that pretty seriously, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's bad enough when you're doing that to civilians. You do that inside to law. I mean, yeah. Not doing himself any favors, is he? Wow. Well, L. Ron Hubbard 2.0. We got the criminal record. We got the goofy ideas. We got the followers who will send him money no matter what he says. I mean, L. Ron Hubbard 2.0. There it is. So I wish the world were not the way that it is sometimes, but this is the world we live in. The people like this, even from within prison or jail.
Yeah.
Get to pull this stuff off. It's really quite sad. All right. One last thing is yesterday's story. It's sort of an in memoriam. And I thought worth noting because, of course, I knew these two people. I'd interacted with them myself, and I know you did even more over the years. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So, way back in 2013, as Scientology was preparing to open the Superpower Building, which they call the Flag Building, they had, they were doing various construction things, and there were a couple of stately oak trees in Clearwater that were in the way. Well, in a place like Florida, you don't just cut down an oak tree. I mean, they're a pretty rare commodity. And the local government was trying to figure out a way to maybe move them. And so Scientology just said, forget it. And they cut down these trees and they paid a fine, right? Because, Scientology knows best, right? And it was kind of
Always.
outrageous and people were angry. And I had this idea. I asked Lynette Observer Wagoner, who's our sort of in-house illustrator, could you give me a scene where some of our favorite people who have passed on are now resting under the shade of these two poor oak trees that Scientology destroyed? And so she created this wonderful image for me with some people that we really revere and don't want to ever forget. And over the years, we've updated it. So most recently, I wanted to add Mark Plummer and Andreas Haldal Lund to the scene, and she did. She did a great job, and joined such figures as Lisa McPherson, Robert Von Young, Bob Minton, Gabe Casares, Denise Brennan, Nan McLean, Ida Camburn, who was so wonderful to me when I very first started doing this 29 years ago. She would send me emails telling me how much she liked my story. She had lost a son in Scientology and was one of the people that was trying to, get the word out about Scientology way back in the mid 90s.
Right.
And just so I'd love it if people went by and took a look at it and just thought about those people. We're just, we'd never want to forget the amazing job they did one way or the other to bring attention to Scientology's abuses.
Absolutely. There is so much we know only because they came forward, only because of the work they did. Andreas putting together Xenu.net has probably been more personally responsible for more academics, more journalists, more people in the world understanding Scientology at a deeper level, because he posted everything there on that website. Mark Plummer and his file cabinets of Scientology materials that he had pulled out and taken out with him, and he shared freely all the time, flag orders, hidden knowledge, deep inside information that he was willing to help people with, even though, his own life was not necessarily always as organized as he wanted it to be. He was always there for me and for others.
Yeah.
And all the other people that you just listed, of course, Minton and McPherson, all of these people are, these are the giants whose shoulders that we stand on. And I definitely don't want them to be forgotten. So thank you for doing that work. It's important. Okay, guys. And I thought it was an appropriate ending for the show this week. Do you have any previews or ideas on anything coming up this week?
We've got a couple of court hearings coming up this week. A little bit of a progress in Jane Doe 1's lawsuit, and then the Valerie thing in court. We'll see what Judge Killefer has to say about what she's been through, and so we'll be looking forward to that.
Okay. All right. So more updates coming, folks. Definitely, if you are not subscribed to Tony's Substack, the address is right there on the screen in front of you. And get your daily notifications so you can keep in the loop on this, and then catch our summaries at the end of every week, or I guess at the beginning of the next week on Mondays. All right, folks. Thanks for coming around and watching, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.